What's up there, guys? Welcome to my channel. My name is Titus AB, aka Mr. Africa, aka Woke. And if this is your first time on my channel is all about leadership, self-improvement, and of course adventure. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about one of the most classic cartoons that you and I have watched when we were growing up as children, Pinocchio. I'm going to be talking about 5 most important lessons that I learned from Pinocchio. So stay tuned to the end of this video because the 5th one is definitely going to not only crack you up but also going to educate you so well. Let's get it. Like me, you're probably someone who loves entertainment, of course, and when you were a child you probably have watched the cartoon Pinocchio. Who isn't fascinated by the idea of a wooden boy whose nose grows longer each time he lies? I mean, that's really classic. The person who wrote that, I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now, but kudos on a good job. A cartoon like that could simply feel or look after watching it like just a cartoon or just another entertainment opportunity, but usually there are important lessons that are embedded in those entertainment programs that we could really benefit from, and today I'm bringing the 5 of them. Now let's get straight into the first. A brief rundown of the whole cartoon of Pinocchio. Now there was this carpenter called Geppetto who had lost his wife and he was a widow and he had no son. He led a very lonely life, and because of this he decided one day to carve a wooden puppet, of course out of wood, and while he was asleep a fairy came and gave life to that particular wooden puppet, and that is where Pinocchio came to life. So when Geppetto saw that he came to life, he was so excited, decided to send Pinocchio to school. And one thing happened while Pinocchio was on his way to school. He saw his friends going to a puppet show and he decided to skip school and go to the puppet show, and that's when our very first lesson comes. What happened when he went to the puppet show is that he got into trouble, and this trouble came in the form of the puppeteer captured him and decided to use him as a puppet for the further shows, because, well, of course he was going to get many more people interested in watching his shows if there was an actual live puppet not controlled by strings. And this was his first downfall, this was his first trouble, this was his first problem. So what does this particular experience teach us? This experience teaches us that we are always going to have repercussions or negative repercussions. We are always going to have punishments on the wrongdoings or the derails that we have. If we set a goal and we're working towards that goal, the moment we are derailed from that particular goal or that particular objective, we are going to be punished. We are going to experience some sort of backlash, which could either be from our own side or from the trail on which we are on. So once again, when you set a goal, when you set an objective, try to stick to it, try to move through it, and do not derail, because the moment you derail, you're going to get into big trouble. So if I can summarize all of that in one sentence, it is that wrong actions have consequences. Let's move on to number 2. So later on in the course of the story, we learned that the fairy came and freed him from that particular cage and asked him what happened. And he said that he was kidnapped, he was abducted on his way to school. And what happened when he said that was that his nose actually grew longer. Now, as unusual as that might seem, it actually tells us a very powerful lesson about lies. When we lie or when we derail from the truth, our bodies change physically. Our mind actually changes, our brain changes. Now what happens when we lie is that we trick our brain into thinking that what is not false or what is not true is actually true. So we are corrupting our own sense of what we consider real. We're corrupting our own sense of reality. And if we are corrupting our own sense of reality, then what else can we rely upon if not our own selves? If you corrupt yourself and your own self is the only thing that you truly have, then what can you rely upon? You're relying upon a corrupt structure. So when we lie, our brains physically change to adapt to that, adapting to seeing a lie or dishonesty as honesty, and that is not the path that you really want to go down as a human being. So the second lesson is that lies change us. As small as they might seem in the physical realm, you might not physically see your brain changing after throwing a big lie, but trust me that it actually does change not only the way you think about the truth, but it does change the way your neurons in your brain are actually wired. I'm not a specialist or a professional in this particular area, but if you do your research, you're going to see that what I'm saying is true. Let's move on to number 3. After this particular experience, he did not want to go home because his nose was longer and he was ashamed, or he was afraid that his father was going to see that he had lied. And so what he decided to do was to go to Toyland and play with the other boys and the other children who were playing at Toyland, and to basically eat candy all day and not go to school. Now that was a particular scenario of absolute and complete pleasure for Pinocchio. And when he spent time on Toyland with all the candy, with all the enjoyment and all the relaxation and all the pleasure, what happened is that he was turned into a donkey. He actually started to grow ears and he looked like a donkey. Now what this tells us is that pleasure always results to pain. We live now in a generation where everybody wants everything easy, and like Kierkegaard said, his primary purpose in life was to make things more difficult. Right? I mean, that doesn't sound very okay, but his primary purpose, as he mentioned, was to make things more difficult, because he believed that mankind was moving towards a direction where things will become so easy that people will cry for difficulty. And so this is one thing. This is one reason why people who don't have a purpose in their life, or people don't have a direction that they are following, they always feel so miserable and so frustrated every single day of their lives, because they have no difficulty that they're chasing behind. With the current world as it is today, social media or technology has basically made everything easy for us. It is easy to just get a meal by pressing 2 buttons on your phone. It's easy to travel from one part of the world to the other, in a couple of hours. Everything is basically made easy. I mean, that's not a bad thing in itself, but when everything becomes so easy, when everything becomes pleasure, then we find that it eventually turns into pain. So unregulated pleasure generates pain. But that's a good one. So towards the end of the story, we see a scenario where Geppetto, who was Pinocchio's father, set out to look for Pinocchio, and while he was a few should I say kilometers or meters away from the island on which Pinocchio was, which was a toyland, he saw that a whale was attacking his father and wanted to capsize the ship or the boat or whatever, and so he had to swim to meet the father and to try to save the father. But in the process of that, what happened is the whale swallowed him, the father, and the Jiminy Cricket, who was his little kid conscience. And so when that happened, Pinocchio had to eventually maneuver a way into getting themselves out of the whale's belly back on land. And so when that happened, the fairy came back and awarded Pinocchio the status of a real boy. So it gave Pinocchio the privileges or the abilities that come with being a real boy. And so the lesson that this teaches us is that we have to endure a certain level of help for others. We have to endure a certain level of responsibility for other people in order to be better ourselves. In order for us to become better than the way we previously were, we have to bear responsibility for other people. We have to help other people. We have to basically take upon the responsibilities of other people and bear them as our own responsibility in order for us to be awarded or to be considered as better people. Now, this is very common in the world, where you discover that most of the founding fathers of science as well as arts are praised and are worshipped and are held in so much high esteem because they bore the whole world's responsibility. The solutions that exist to the problems that we have today were basically started by them, or instantiated or created by them. And so because of that, we consider them as icons. We consider them as models, role models, what we look up to. Moving over to the 5th lesson, guys. This one is the most important one. So if you are at this point of the video, make sure you hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Right now, the lesson that we have is this. If we notice in the story, there was a Pinocchio, there was a Jiminy Cricket, and there was his father. Now, the boy Pinocchio was like a human, right? A human being. Let's attribute him to being a human being. And then the Jiminy Cricket was his conscience. So every human being has a conscience. And what happens in the story is that Jiminy Cricket is responsible to advise Pinocchio on the kind of decisions to take or the kind of decisions not to take. So it's like an advisor to Pinocchio. So this transcends back into human existence. Every individual is almost moralless without the conscience. So your conscience somehow is more knowledgeable than you are. Your conscience is more educated, or in some sense wiser than you are, and you need your conscience to be able to make the right decisions. But when you refuse to listen to your conscience, when you refuse to heed to the decisions of your conscience, as Pinocchio did in the story when Jiminy Cricket advised him not to boycott class to go to the puppet show, and he still did, what happens is you get into trouble. So our conscience are like the big moral being that lives inside of us. Every human being has a conscience, which is like the moral being that dwells inside of you, and that conscience is responsible to help you and to advise you and to give you, it's like your own personal advisor, which lives directly inside of you. And so the interesting thing that we can understand is that as we journey through life, our conscience also learns a lot from our journey. So it's like some sort of symbiotic relationship where we teach our conscience, or we are able to corrupt our conscience in a more hard way, and our conscience is able to sanctify us. So that is why some people get to a particular point and they can basically do anything without feeling, because, well, as I usually say, they have killed their conscience. So they have corrupted their conscience. Jiminy Cricket is the conscience, which is our human conscience. Pinocchio is the boy, which is a human being like us, and Geppetto is the father, who is sort of like the creator in this story. So the creator is God, right? So God creates us and gives us a conscience, and that conscience is there to supervise our journey through life. We can learn from that conscience, it can learn from us, we can corrupt it, and the conscience can also sanctify us. So that's it from me today, guys. If you made it to this point in the video, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, leave a comment telling us which lesson was your best lesson, and hopefully that creates some positive impact in your life. Share the video to someone that you think is gonna help. And if you want to get to me on my social media platform, this is my Instagram somewhere here, this is my Facebook, this is my email, but I'm still going to leave them in the description box below so that you can get to me through them. Leave me a message and I'm going to get back to you through my private numbers. That's about it. Have a nice day.